and I heard as it were the noise of thunder, one of the four beasts saying, "Come and see." And I saw and beheld a pale horse, and the rider that sat upon him was Death, and Hell followed with him. Johnny Masterson threw open the window and inhaled deeply as if trying to rid himself of the smells that seemed to saturate his skin. The three men had been locked in this room for the past 24 hours. They had not eaten or slept, but kept their vigil as they fought. The old battle of good over evil. Breathing deeply, Johnny tried to ignore the screams and guttural laughter that emanated from the thing they had tied to the bed. The thing that had once been a small child. Drawing himself back inside, he collapsed into his chair, his senses immediately assaulted by the smell of piss, shit, and vomit. The thing on the bed, sensing his discomfort, chuckled slyly and waggled its cracked and blackened tongue at him, before turning its attention back to the two priests who sat at either side, muttering in bastard Latin as they read the rite of exorcism over and over again. Johnny looked away out of the window at St. Peter's Square, what was left of it anyway. He had seen the rites of exorcism 1,000 times before. It was the priest's time now. When his time came around, there would be no need for words, not in any language. For a minute, he closed his eyes, trying to remember the square as it had once been, with its rearing columns, marble statues, and ornate, trickling fountains, but even with his eyes closed, he could still see the hundreds of tents, shacks, and rusting caravans that now filled this once holy place. It has become a kind of squalid shanty town where the last vestiges of mankind cowered as the denizens of hell stalked the earth. All of Vatican City was the same. From the English Gardens to the Pigna courtyard, every inch of spare land was covered in a sea of tents and leaning hovels. Disease and starvation was the order of the day. Only the Swiss Guard, and to a lesser degree the gendarmerie, and also known as the Vatican City Police, maintained order, ruling over the desperate and lawless with an iron fist. Thieves and lawbreakers were flogged, rapists and murderers banished into the dark zone, also known as Demonland, there to be possessed, eaten or fucked, depending on whatever abomination found you first. Johnny! He jerks awake in his chair, his hands going to his eyes. Falling asleep on the job. You're getting old, Johnny. The thing on the bed crooned at him. I need you awake. Wouldn't want you to miss the best bits. The thing turned towards the younger of the two priests, one who was knelt by the bed, praying frantically, great beads of sweat running down his brow as he read from the Bible clutched tightly in his hand, only stopping now and again to flick holy water at the creature they had tied to the bed. As Johnny watched on, his face impassive, the creature wrenched itself forward, straining at its bounds. It vomited noisily all over the priest's hands, Bible and all. With a cry of disgust, the younger man jumped to his feet, dropping the holy book to the floor and wiping his soiled hands up and down his cassock, his mouth working silently. The creature on the bed chuckled grotesquely before settling back down on the filth-covered sheets, turning its attention to the older priest by its side. Is this the best you can do, Father James? Is this your so-called apprentice? Where'd you find this one? Probably on some farm fucking pigs. Looks like a pig fucker, wouldn't you say, Johnny? It said it slyly, glancing over at the grim-faced man by the window. Do not speak to the creature, the older man commanded. Technically, Johnny was under the command of the priesthood, but chose to ignore the other man anyway. I think they all look alike to me. For a moment, the creature gapes at him before bursting into deep, choking laughter. "That's a good one, Johnny. I like that they do all look the same. You all look like meat to me. You know that boy can't banish me," it said, nodding with contempt at the younger priest who had retreated to the old man's side as if seeking comfort. "I will ascend, Johnny. I will break these bounds and kill you all." Johnny shook his head sadly. "You know, I won't let that happen." "You must kill this vessel, kill this young child to stop me, but you don't mind that, do you, Johnny? How many have you killed now? Murdered? How many men, women, and little children have you slaughtered in the name of the sheep god? How many?" It strained at its bounds, causing the bed to vibrate as it twisted and jerked, desperate to be free, to be let loose upon these hateful men. "I have murdered no one," Johnny said, raising to his feet and pulling a silver stiletto from the sheath on his belt. "You did the killing. It was you and all your bastard kind that caused their deaths." "There is a place for you in hell, Johnny," the thing spat as he approached. "A special place for child killers like you. You're going to burn. You're going to burn in the fires of hell forever. Get away from me." It drew back onto the bed, pinning itself against the headboard. Fuck off, you big fucking child killer. I will tear out your motherfucking soul." Johnny ignored the creature and took out a wooden crucifix from under his shirt. "Far from the grace you have fallen, O child of perdition. In the name of God I smite thee and send you back to the hell from which you came." "Fuck you!" it screamed. "No," Johnny said, smiling. "Fuck you." With practiced piston of his arm, he thrust the blessed silver forward, driving it upwards under the creature's chin, through the soft roof of the mouth and piercing the brain within. The creature jerked, its entire body going rigid, its eyes widening in shocked surprise. Then it slumped back, down to the bed, and lay still. All that remained was the wasted body of a small child. All evil fled. Johnny wiped off a knife and pulled the covers over the tiny figure, made the sign of the cross, and slowly walked away. He'd been back in the barracks less than an hour, just enough time to change his sodden clothes, have a shower, and grab a bite to eat when the priest walked in. The man was tall and lean with a hawk-like nose. His vestments hung onto his skinny frame as he walked over to Johnny's table. "The Most Holy Father wishes to see you," the man stammered, looking down at his feet. Johnny rose and nodded, not bothering to introduce himself. The man obviously didn't know who he was, and Johnny didn't bother to learn the names of the men who served in the priesthood. New priests were indoctrinated into free faith every day from the nameless masses. They did not survive very long, but the temptation of 3 square meals a day and a warm bed, well, it was just too much for some people to resist. "Lead the way," Johnny said, strapping on his gun. "Tell me where His Holiness is today." "Where he always is," the other man replied, tugging uncomfortably at the white collar. How long?" Johnny asked, looking the other man up and down, taking in his unshaven face and dirty fingernails. "How long what?" the priest said, finally looking Johnny in the face before quickly looking away. Johnny didn't mind. He was used to having this effect on people. His face was a mass of scars. "How long have you been a priest?" 2 weeks. 2 weeks, and you're already running errands for His Holiness. Tell me, Have you seen him yet?" "Yes," the young priest replied, a look of adoration lighting up his face. "I saw him this very day, standing by the side of our most holy father, Raphael. I fell to my knees before his most holy light." "Oh, he would have loved that." "I was in the presence of an angel, a real-life angel." Johnny was not surprised to see the tears streaming openly down the other man's face, or the look of blind exultation stamped across his rough features. He spoke to me. He told me that I was the beloved of God." "Yeah, they do that sometimes," Johnny replied, pushing past. "We better get going. We don't want to keep Ralph waiting now, would we?" "Ralph?" "Never mind," Johnny said as they emerged into the light. It was summer now, and the days were long and hot. "You said His Holiness was in the Sistine Chapel." "Yes, with Raphael," the priest said, falling in beside him as they entered St. Peter's Square. "Yes, you mentioned him," Johnny said as he tried to navigate his way past flapping tents, rustling lean-tos, and smouldering garbage. He sometimes wondered how the entire place didn't go up in flames. "There!" someone shouted as they passed. Johnny whirled his hand, dropping to the butt of his gun. "There they are!" A man had separated himself from the milling throng. Now he staggered forward, a grey skeleton with a long, shaggy beard, and grabbed at the startled priest. "Alms!" he begged. "Alms for the poor!" "I have nothing for you," the priest said, wrenching himself free, a look of distaste flashing quickly across his face as he straightened his cassock with sharp, angry jerks. "The morning rations have already been issued. You will eat again this evening when the evening rations are dispensed." "Eat? What did you eat for breakfast, priest? I had a handful of berries and a crust of stale bread." The other people had started to gather now, angry grumbles of agreement rippling through the crowd. "And look at this killer," he said, turning to Johnny, taking in his massive frame. Johnny said nothing, but just stood there, a rock against an encroaching tide of trouble. "Leave now," the priest commanded. "It is not for you to question the servants of God." "The servants of God?" the man howled, the light of madness dancing behind his eyes. "Oh, shit," Johnny whispered, knowing what was coming, as the man tensed, ready to leap. He drew his gun, ready to protect the foolish priest, but he needn't bothered. Before the man could even say another word, a chainmail-clad arm wrapped itself around the old man's neck and threw him to the ground. The crowd let out a frightened yell and scattered as a platoon of the Swiss Guard marched through, trampling makeshift homes and ripping through tents, their gleaming halberds lowered. Any protest was met with violence, until only Johnny, the priest, and the groaning man on the ground remained. The captain gave a quick signal and his men broke ranks, forming a protective circle around the three men. "What is going on here?" he demanded, addressing the priest. "This man assaulted me." "Did he now?" the captain said, towing the man's side with a booted foot. "You know it's a death sentence to harm a priest, old man." The man is crazy," Johnny said, holstering his weapon. "Half mad with hunger. The old fool, he meant no harm." "They are all hungry, yet they do not all assault the priesthood." "Priesthood?" Johnny laughed. "Look at this one. He's only been off the farm a couple of weeks." "Regardless," the captain went on, lowering his sword until it hovered just above the old man's throat. "He is a priest, indoctrinated into the most holy Roman Catholic Church and a member of the priesthood, and therefore sacrosanct under the new laws of Vatican City. So, unless Father..." "Michael," the priest said, chest swelling with pride. "My name is Father Michael, Captain, and I have no objections whatsoever if the common rabble believe they can do whatever they like, and to a priest no less, then There will be anarchy and chaos. You may proceed, Captain. Wait, Johnny said. You may not intervene in this matter, the captain said, eyeing Johnny nervously. Johnny held no rank as such, yet was a special attaché to the Pope, allowed into His Holy Highness's presence any time, day or night. To be honest, not much was known about the man except that he was rumoured to dispense mercy to those possessed or overtaken by the minions of hell. Also, it was believed in certain circles that he was a member of the Broken Messiah, a so-called secretive group of exorcists and spies that answered directly to Pope Clement II himself. I said, "Continue, Captain," the scruffy-looking priest said, glaring at Johnny. You will do nothing, Johnny said, grabbing the startled priest by the ear. He dragged him forward, mumbling something into his face from between clenched teeth before shoving him away. The priest stumbled, nearly falling. Only the captain's arm stopped him from joining the old man on the floor. For a moment, the priest just stood there, his mouth gaping. His face had gone deathly white and his hands shook where he scrambled for his crucifix. You wouldn't dare, he gulped. Johnny said nothing, just stared at the other man. You wouldn't really do that to another human being, wouldn't I? Let's get one thing clear, priest. I don't make idle threats. Let him go, the priest said, turning to the captain. Quickly now, release him. The captain immediately sheathed his sword before roughly pulling the old man to his feet and pushing him away. What did he say to you, father? The captain said. Did he threaten you at all? No, not at all. You can go now, Captain. In fact, I shall go with you. Good idea, Johnny said, smiling at the priest. Go with God, Father. The priest said nothing, but quickly scurried away, taking his armed escort with him. Johnny smiled, glad to be rid of the man. Too many priests in one day, well, it made his teeth itch. He hadn't gone more than a few steps when he spotted Father Matthew waiting for him on the steps of the basilica. As usual, when he saw his old friend and mentor, a stream of emotions ran through him. The first and always quickest to pass was fear. Even now, after 30 years, he could still associate this man with fear and pain. He could still remember the first time they met. The steaming chalice, the bubbling silver, and his screams of pain as cleansing fire purified his soul. Yet, overriding these emotions was love. A love so deep it could only be compared to a son's love for his father, for not only had this man saved his life, but also his immortal soul. Johnny still dreamed of those times, and the training he had endured at the hands of Father Matthew at the Santa Maria Monastery just outside of Florence. The training itself had been brutal, almost Spartan in its intensity. Johnny had arrived with the coming dawn just as 4 other recruits, 3 boys and 1 girl, all orphans like himself, were being introduced to their new instructors. Johnny had stepped forward, meaning to join the others, but Father Matthew had gently pulled him back. Not you, Johnny. You're with me, he said, falling to one knee before the boy. I told you once that hate is a seed that grows, and you will come to hate me. But know this, everything I do is for your own good, to make you strong for the coming days, to keep you alive and to serve God as best you can. On this, Father Matthew had been wrong. Johnny had not come to hate the grim-faced man, but to despise him. For when the other boys were sleeping, Johnny was running. When they were eating, Johnny was learning the way of the blade and the cleansing fire. When the others were given rest and respite, Johnny was stuck in a dingy classroom, and whenever Johnny got up the nerve to complain, Father Matthew would tell him in his gravelly Irish voice, The mind is a weapon, boy. Perhaps the greatest weapon of all. So you must keep it sharp and keen as any blade. And so the lessons had gone on, just like the training, until one day Johnny had looked in the mirror, found himself nearly a full-grown man. It was in his 17th year, as he lay exhausted on his narrow cot, that Father Matthew had entered his room and dropped into a nearby chair. And Johnny, for the first time, noticed just how much grey had crept into his mentor's hair over those long years. "You're nearly a man now, Johnny," Matthew had said in a surprisingly gentle voice. "You are getting stronger, and I older. Tell me, Johnny, how would you like to leave this place and come with me to Rome?" "At what cost?" Johnny had immediately countered at this. Father Matthew had chuckled. "You know me well, Johnny." "Yes, I know you well, priest." "Feeling sorry for yourself?" Father Matthew asked. "It's not a luxury I can afford," Johnny replied hotly. "You taught me that." "I've taught you many things," Father Matthew said, climbing to his feet. "Now it's time to put them into practice." "What do you mean?" "You're taking your final test tomorrow, boy," he said, looking over his shoulders as he headed for the door. "Pass, and come with me to Rome. Fail." But he never finished the sentence, just gently closed the door behind him. The next morning they met in the monastery courtyard, Father Matthew leaning heavily against a battered open-top jeep. "You got my bag, I see," he said, noting the large duffel bag swinging by Johnny's side. "Yeah, I got it," Johnny said, dumping it unceremoniously into the back of the jeep. "Well, that's good. Now climb on in, boy. We're going for a ride." Johnny did just that, squeezing his already massive bulk into the narrow seat. Father Matthew followed suit, trying his best to accommodate Johnny's huge shoulders. "Damn, boy," he chuckled. "How you've grown. Next time I'll bring a tank." "I'm not a boy," Johnny glared. "Yes, you are," Matthew replied, his gaze unwavering. "Until I tell you different, that's exactly what you are." Johnny dropped his eyes under Matthew's steely gaze and stared sullenly out of the window. Matthew said nothing more, but dropped the jeep into gear and sped out of the courtyard, leaving a trail of dust behind him. It was nearly an hour later, as the jeep was speeding up the winding mountain road, that the two men began to speak again. "So, where are we going?" Johnny finally asked. "Il posto alto," Father Matthew replied, never taking his eyes off the road. "The high place," Johnny translated. "It's a small village up in the mountains," Father Matthew said, glancing at Johnny through the corner of his eye. "Yeah, I remember the place. You took me there once on my 11th birthday. A rare treat." "It was your 12th, Matthew said, turning off the main road and onto a bumpy side street, the leaning trees forming a kind of tunnel, shadowing the men's faces with broken sunlight. They said nothing more, both lost in their own thoughts, until at last Father Matthew pulled into a weed-strewn parking lot. He turned off the ticking engine and casually lit up a cigarette. "So, what now?" Johnny asked, growing restless. "Well, now you take your final test. This is a hunt, Johnny. Something is plaguing this place, and it's up to you to find it and kill it. The simplicity itself." If Johnny was surprised, he didn't show it. "I'd best get to the graveyard then. I believe it's at the other end of the village and is rather large for such a small place." "And why is that?" Matthew asked, his eyes narrowing suspiciously. "Because that's where the ghouls will be," Johnny grinned at him. "And how in the hell do you know we're here to hunt ghouls?" Matthews said, crushing out his cigarette angrily. Simplicity itself, Johnny said, his smile growing wider. I looked in the duffel bag you sent me to fetch. Well, I never told you to do that. You never told me not to either. You simply said fetch me the bag. For a minute, Farmer Matthews' face turned an alarming shade of red, but then his shoulders sagged and, much to Johnny's relief, he began to laugh. Adapt and overcome, hey Johnny. So, tell me, what do you see in the bag that makes you believe we're hunting ghouls? Okay, Johnny said, taking a deep breath. There are no holy objects in the bag. That counts out demons and vampires. Also no silver ammo, so that counts out lycanthropes. The ammo I did find is a mixture of pyro and explosive, which means whatever we're fighting is very susceptible to fire. There's also a stabbed vest, and ghouls are known for sharp claws, and, most telling of all, the rotting human arm you've vacuum-packed in there. I won't ask where you got it from. Father Matthews smiled, pleased with his apprentice's cunning and sharp mind. Very good, he said, climbing out of the car. Now, all we have to do is kill him. Them? Johnny said, scrambling after him. Of course, Matthew said. Ghouls hunt in packs, Johnny. You know that. How many? Johnny asked, grabbing up his equipment. 4, maybe 5. Well, that's what the villagers told us before we evacuated them. I guess you'll find out tonight. Great, Johnny said, following Matthew into the deserted village. That's just great. That night, Johnny stood in the graveyard, a full moon sailing overhead, casting crawling shadows amongst the leaning tombstones. Father Matthew stood outside the cemetery gates, smoking and watching Johnny very closely as he laid down the bait. Johnny knew the smell of rotting flesh would drag the ghouls out of hiding. They were scavengers by nature. They would attack a grown man if they came upon him alone, bleeding or gravely injured, but they were cowardly by nature. Still, it was a brave man that stood between them and a meal once a feeding frenzy had been triggered. And that's what Johnny was doing, standing right between them and their food. The first creature seemingly materialized out of nowhere. 1 minute Johnny was scanning the shadows, trying to look everywhere at once. The next, the creature was just there, hunched atop a leaning tombstone, its feral eyes awash with moonlight as it scented the night air, almost wolf-like. Johnny cursed quietly under his breath and slowly unslung his rifle, never taking his eyes off the creature before him. He had only ever seen its kind rendered in pictures and rough sketches, but they paled in comparison to the real thing. The creature was mainly manlike in regards that it had 2 arms and 2 legs, but that's where any resemblance to man abruptly stopped. It was impossibly thin. Its hide a muddy brown colour and tough looking like old leather. The neck was long and corded with muscle to support a large bald head and made up mostly of eyes and teeth. The creature was on the move now, slinking through the tall glass towards him. Johnny raised a rifle and the creature immediately froze, whining and snarling at him. Suddenly there was a rustling from Johnny's left and another creature crawled its way out of the shadow. From his right came a gurgling howl and another of the creatures appeared, white foam dripping from its chomping jaws. From above him came the rustling of leaves. Johnny's head shot upwards, just in time to see a large shadow detach itself from an overhanging branch. With a cry, he thrust his rifle upwards, peppering the falling creature with hot lead. The explosive rounds tore great chunks out of its loathsome hide and set its writhing flesh on fire as it fell dead at his feet. He screamed out as hooked claws pierced his flesh, dragging his legs from under him. Johnny fought against the pain as the teacher tore into him. Sighting the rifle down the length of his body, he pulled the trigger, shattering the creature's head in an explosion of blood and bone. Another creature came bounding on. Just as Johnny staggered to his knees, it leapt for him. Johnny let out a cry and threw himself back down. He rolled to his left, just as the creature sailed overhead before leaping to his feet. His wounds almost completely forgotten as adrenaline flooded his system. The creature landed hard and spun about, hissing wildly as razor-like claws slashed into Johnny's back. Without even turning, he thrust the butt of his rifle backwards. Hearing the satisfying crunch of bone, he didn't bother to look, but opened up on the snarling creature in front of him instead. His muzzle flashes lighting up the night skies. Hellfire rounds did their grisly work. The gun clicked empty, just as Johnny span round, desperately scrambling for another magazine, but it was too late. The slobbering ghoul rammed into him, smashing him down to the ground, stealing his breath as it screamed in triumph, its head lunging towards his unprotected neck. He just managed to get the now empty rifle between them, ramming it into the ghoul's gaping mouth, thrusting it backwards. Out of an act of sheer desperation, he lunged forward, sinking his teeth into the creature's vile flesh, tearing at its throat. Vicious blood filled his mouth, pouring over his clenched jaw, spilling down his chin, soaking his shirt. Howling in pain, the creature shook free, falling backwards, skeletal-like hands hovering over its ruined throat. "You bastard hellbound fuck," Johnny grated, scooping up his rifle and advancing onto the fallen ghoul. "You're going straight back to hell." He brought the butt of his rifle whistling down over and over again, pulverizing the creature's head, cracking its skull until only a red ruin remained, when strong hands grabbed at him. "It's over, Johnny," Father Matthew screamed into his ear. "It's dead, Johnny. They're all dead." Johnny stopped his wild swinging and looked at Matthew as if seeing him for the first time. "5, he said, breaking free of the other man's grip and desperately looking around the graveyard. "The villagers said there were 5 of them." Smiling, Matthew raised a bloody machete from his side. "I don't think he'll be bothering you, Johnny." Johnny grinned then. "I thought you weren't allowed to help." Father Matthew smiled innocently. "It was self-defense, Johnny. The thing was coming right for me." "Right." Johnny winced at the pain in his back. "It jumped right over the graveyard fence to get at you." Again, Matthew shrugged. "Maybe it saw the size of you and decided I was an easier target. But you showed it different. Either way, thank God you were there." "I've always been there for you, Johnny. And I always will be. Now, come on," he said, supporting the younger man as they limped out of the graveyard. "Let's get you patched up. It's off to Rome." Johnny stopped and looked the other man in the eye. "What is it, Matthew? What will I learn there?" "The truth, my son," Matthew said sadly. "God help us all. The truth." Johnny searched the man's eyes, said no more. Exhausted and bloody, both men staggered into the waiting dawn. Johnny, you with us?" Johnny gave himself a mental shake, dragging himself back from the past as he reached for Father Matthew's outstretched hand. "You seem far away, boy." "Yeah, I was thinking about the past." "Why in God's name would you want to do that?" Father Matthew said, gazing over the sea of tents. "All it has done is lead us to this place." "Yeah," Johnny said, following the other man's gaze. "Do you think we ever had a chance to stop it?" "No. One cannot stand against prophecy. It's all foretold in the book of Revelation." So we never stood a chance. All that blood spilled for nothing. No, Matthew said, gently clasping Johnny's arm. Not for nothing. We could not hold back the tide, but we did delay it. Delayed it long enough for the Mother Church to prepare herself. If it wasn't for us, many of these people here today, they'd be dead now. Their tormented souls condemned to hell's fires for all eternity, but... come on now, he said gently, guiding Johnny up the marble stairs. Forget the past, it's done. It only exists in the minds of men. For now we must look to the future, and for right now, His Holiness wishes to see you. He wishes to see me or his winged friend. Does it matter? These days they are one and the same. And that's the problem, Johnny said, pulling up short before the doors of the basilica. I take my orders from His Holiness alone. No one else. Dear God, Matthew laughed. Only you could be suspicious of an angel, Johnny. I don't like them. I trust their motives even less. We're nothing to them. Chess pieces to be moved around, manipulated at will. They saved us, Johnny, Matthew said, the first hint of anger creeping into his voice. If it wasn't for them, we'd all be dead. We are dead. Millions of us. We're on the brink of extinction, Matthew. They did what they could. For 666 days, they fought against the hordes of hell. Yeah, with mankind crushed in the middle. A moth between two burning flames. All of humanity no more than a collateral fucking damage. And in the end, for what? Neither side won. Fought ourselves to a bloody stalemate and retreated to lick the wounds, leaving the world in ruins where the ghosts of humanity live out the rest of their lives in this pointless purgatory. You really believe that? Matthew said, his anger melting away at despair in Johnny's voice. That there's no point? That God has no more plans for us? God? Johnny laughed, pushing through the doors and entering the basilica. Where is He, Matthew? Answer me that. We know He exists. Maybe He doesn't care anymore. Maybe He stopped giving a shit about us when we nailed His only son to a tree. Perhaps, Matthew sighed as they stopped just outside the entrance to the chapel. But you're about to talk to the closest thing we have to Him, so try and show Him some respect. Of course, Johnny said, smiling sadly. And never mind me, Matthew. You know I always get melancholy after an exorcism, especially one that goes so spectacularly wrong. I know, Matthew said, laying a gentle hand on the younger man's shoulder. You've always had a big heart. Even as a child you had a big heart. It's both your greatest strength and your greatest weakness. Go on then. Best not keep him waiting. Go with God, Johnny, he said, making the sign of the cross. You too, Johnny said, but his face was troubled as he watched the old man walk away. Johnny took a deep breath and entered the chapel. For a moment he did nothing but stare at the ground, taking deep breaths. He could feel Raphael's presence all about him, a warm feeling of love and compassion, but Johnny knew it for what it was. A lie. He'd seen these creatures at their worst, cutting down demons, trampling and crushing any human that got in their way, flaming swords slaughtering the unholy and innocent alike. Johnny. The voice was a mere whisper, but it caught like a fishhook in Johnny's mind, dragging his eyes away from the marble floor and towards the waiting angel. Johnny tried to pull back, to resist, but he had already taken half a dozen steps toward the glowing figure, waiting for him by the candlelit altar. Bracing, he made himself stop, hands clenched into tight fists by his side, Johnny, look at me. Once again he was compelled, and though he tried to resist with all his might, he looked up into the face of the waiting angel and knew he was lost. When he finally came to his senses, he was on his knees by the altar, Raphael standing before him with pitying eyes. Why must you always make things so difficult between us, Johnny? Johnny said nothing, but staggered away, holding onto the altar as he tried to clear his head. Why do you always have to play such fucking games? Games? Raphael asked, a hint of humour in his voice. What fucking games do you speak of, Johnny? You know what games. The glamour magic, Johnny said, standing straighter. You tried to bewitch me. I did no such thing. I am what I am. I cannot help the effect I have on humans. You can't help it. Then why can I look upon you now and stand before you, my own man once again? Because I have, as you humans say, toned it down. You seem to be a little overwhelmed by my presence when you first entered. Where is His Holiness? He asked, trying not to look too closely at Raphael, who had once again started to glow softly. I was told he wished to see me. Why won't you look at me? Why do you fear me so much? God sent me to help you. I am the guardian of this place. Look at me, Johnny. There is no need to be afraid. Johnny did as he was bid. There was no compulsion this time. He looked because he wanted to. Raphael stood before him, naked and unashamed. He was perfect in every way. No, that was wrong. He was beyond perfect. He was beautiful and held an unearthly, strange beauty that stole one's breath away, a dangerous beauty that made you want to fall on your knees before him, to offer him your love, your life, your very soul. It was these emotions that so overwhelmed Johnny, yet he could not look away. Raphael's face was a sculptor's dream, far beyond anything Michelangelo could ever have imagined. The faces of the angels in his magnificent frescoes paled in comparison to the real thing. Raphael stood a living monument to the glory of God. Raphael smiled as if reading some of Johnny's thoughts. Thank you, Johnny, he said. You are too kind. Is this what this is all about? You want me to tell me how pretty you are? God damn it. We could have saved some time if... But that was as far as he went. Raphael moved in a blur of speed, grabbing Johnny up around the neck. He slammed him down backwards over the altar, sending candles and hot wax flying in every direction. Thou shalt not take the Lord God's name in vain. Do you hear me, Johnny? He said, shaking the helpless man back and forth. Before the Christ came to forgive man his sins, my brothers and I destroyed whole cities for such an affront to our God. Those were harsh times, and now those times have come round again. So watch your blasphemous mouth around me, Johnny. You watch it very closely. Let me go, son of a bitch. Johnny managed to gasp for a moment. The pressure increased and Johnny was sure he was a dead man, but just as suddenly, the hand was gone, and he crumpled to the floor, massaging his neck as he tried to learn how to breathe again once more. You have heart. I will give you that, Raphael said, folding his wings. You will need it where you're going. And where do you think I'm going? Johnny said, staggering to his feet. Ostia Antica, for a start. We have lost contact with the colony there. No word for 4 days now. No supply shipments. Nothing. I sent a detachment of the Swiss Guard along the road of sorrow, a small army to look into it. They were all well armed and carrying radios. The last we heard from them, they were a mile out from Ostia Antica. Then, just like that radio, silence. Nothing.
Did they have a priest with them?
2, Raphael said, his wings stirring with agitation. Ostia is a blessed place. The bones of Saint Monica are buried there, making the city a holy place inviolable to the demon hordes.
Humans, perhaps, Johnny said. Raiders? Scavengers?
Doubtful. The city is well garrisoned, and the ancient walls have all been rebuilt and reinforced. The place has never been so secure, not since the Romans who built it left.
Then what?
I don't know, Johnny. That's why I'm sending you, to find out.
And what in hell's name do you think I can do? You sent an entire detachment of Swiss Guard out there, they didn't return, and now you're sending me?
Something has to be done, the angel said, pacing the room. Without the fish from the port city, the people here will all starve. We are already on the brink. Ostia Antica is the last lifeline we have left.
Then why don't you go? I'm sure whatever is going on there, you're more than capable of taking care of it. But again, the angel shook his head sadly.
If I leave this place for even a second, the hordes of hell will descend upon this place and tear you all to pieces. No, I am sorry, Johnny. You shall have to go. One man can sneak into places a small army cannot. You will go and report back what you have seen. Now go.
He said it in a voice that brooked no argument.
Go get some rest. I have a feeling you may need it. And try not to worry so much. Tomorrow, after all, is another day.
Johnny spent the rest of the day gathering equipment. First, he went into the armory. From the armory, he took one SG-550. He was going to need some extra firepower in the Demon Land. He took 200 rounds of Silver 6 ammo, the explosive kind, plus a SIG P220 sidearm with 100 rounds of armor-piercing rounds. He also had his own trusty sword, acid-edged and silver-tipped and blessed by the Pope himself, which he always carried sheathed across his back. From the armoury he went across to the SQMs, also known as boots and socks. He picked up waterproof sleeping bag and some ration packs, not wanting to be over-encumbered for the long journey ahead. By the time he arrived back at the barracks and stowed his gear, the sun was already setting. Johnny sat by the window, smoked one of his rare cigarettes. The setting sun burned red across St. Peter's Square. Somewhere a woman was weeping in despair. A baby cried out in hunger. Johnny Masterson crushed out the cigarette, fell into his bunk, dreamed of children burning, whilst he wept in his sleep.